So I want to uh, preface this by saying that um, what I'm about to share, I am not saying that this is 100% correct because I'm just sharing what I have observed and what God has told me. But I am not God, so I cannot tell you, I cannot speak on behalf of him with 100% certainty. Only God can do that. Um, but having said that, though, he has revealed to me some of his patterns, and that's what I'm going to share with you. And so, a lot of this is probably correct, mostly. That's the best way I can put it. So take it with a grain of salt. And but I'm going to share with you some some revelations that God has given me. This has been 3 years in the works, actually. If you remember, 3 years ago, I shared the Noah's flood timeline, um, and I haven't really understood that fully, and I still don't. But God has revealed.
Lottery ticket you're bound to win. That's what I'm saying.
Catherine, can you mute yourself?
Empowerment, the ability to prosper and succeed.
Sister, there you go. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. So, um, so recently in the last, I would say in the last month and a half to 2 months, God revealed to me the first part of the Noah's flood timeline, what that really means. And this is going to tie into it. And so I titled this Supermoon Tetrads and Three Pentecosts. You will see what I mean by this. Before I go any further, I always forget to give credit to people that have helped me to understand this a little better. So I'm going to go over that. There's an article by Dr. Alex Jessen, that is on the Torah.com website. And I studied this article, and it really helped me to understand why we have three Pentecosts instead of just one. It's a really great article. I encourage you to get a hold of this article, but I'll present the summary of it during today's teaching. And also, I ran across Mr. Gabriel Ansley Erb, a Bible teacher. He wrote a book called 2028 and Declaring the End from the Beginning. And he is one of the few that I found to have the same dating timing that God has led me to. So I'm going to share some of that if we have time later today. And Dr. Barry he is one of the watchmen out there. Everybody knows him. He's a chiropractor by profession, but he quit his practice some years ago and decided to go full time in teaching God's word. Mr. Ken Potter I think he comes from an engineering background, but he's also one of the watchmen out there. Pastor Mark Blitz, he teaches on the end times, and then there are some few websites that I always use. Torahcalendar.com. It's really useful in figuring out the Hebrew calendar dates and feasts. BlueLetterBible.org is a great online tool. It's a powerful search engine to look when you're looking up original Hebrew words and Greek. And the eSword.net is a great King James Bible that I use. So these are some of the resources that I use to put this presentation together. So when you talk about supermoon, tetrads, you have to understand the solar and lunar eclipses on the day of the Lord. So there's a lot of scripture that refers to solar and lunar eclipses on the day of the Lord. And what is the day of the Lord, right? And this word day of the Lord occurs repetitively in the Bible. It refers to the end times, and it's supposed to occur with these celestial heavenly signs with the eclipses. And it's interesting when you look at these verses, you have these eclipses occurring not just on one time, but before, during, and after the day of the Lord. So this is a repetitive thing that is supposed to occur in the heavens. So I put together these verses. Let's go over some of these things. So in book of Joel, chapter 2, verse 30 to 31, I'm sure you heard of this. It says, and I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and the terrible day of the Lord come. So Apostle Peter at Pentecost, the first Pentecost, I believe it was maybe the second Pentecost, but he also quoted this verse in book of Acts. He said, I will show wonders in heaven above and signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapor of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and notable day of the Lord comes. So in book of Acts, Apostle Peter calls it notable day, not a terrible day, but we know that this is referring to the day of the Lord at the end times. So he says this before, and if you look at this verse, you will see that there's signs occurring in the heavens and in the earth with blood and fire and pillars of smoke. It looks like maybe perhaps wildfires to fire resulting from wars, or pillars of smoke like coming from a volcano or things like this. And then he goes into heavenly signs where the sun turns into darkness, which appears like that's referring to a solar eclipse that happens on the new moon. So I learned that solar eclipses only occurs on the new moon, interestingly, and likewise lunar eclipses only occur on the full moon. So when the moon turns into blood, when you have a blood moon, that is a full moon that occurs. So it has to happen, solar eclipse on the new moon and the blood moon on the full moon in the middle of the month. So let's look at another group of verses that shows the same ecliptic signs, if you will, during the tribulation. These are the two groups of verses that refers to the tribulation itself, not before the day of the Lord. And Revelation 6, verse 12 says, and I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal. So Jesus has already begun to open the seals. This is happening during the tribulation. And lo, there was a great earthquake again, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, probably from a solar eclipse. Could the sun become black in other ways? Could be that, yes, if you have a cloudy sky, or it could happen like that too. But in order for the entire earth, a large group of large areas of earth to be darkened, it's more likely that it is an eclipse. And I'll continue here. And the moon became as blood. Again, the full moon showing the blood moon. In Luke 21, there's another verse that says a very similar thing. And there shall be signs. This is Jesus speaking about the end times. There shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars. So there's some signs in the stars as well, not just the sun and the moon. And upon the earth, distress of nations. So this is during the tribulation, when all the nations are under duress, under tribulation, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. And then there's another verse that shows the same thing, as I said before, occurring after or right before the tribulation ends. Right here on Matthew 24, Jesus speaking again, he says, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars, again, the stars shall fall from heaven, maybe perhaps a meteor shower, that could be referring to the stars falling from heaven, and the powers of heaven shall be shaken. So we have the same thing happening, the sun being darkened, the moon turning into blood, solar and lunar eclipses happening before, during, and after the tribulation here. So so why am I mentioning all this? It's because I'm trying to find out when he is coming. So you might be asking, well, how can you know? Because Jesus said himself, no one knows the day or the hour. And he even said, not even the sun, right? So a lot of people understand this verse in a kind of a misunderstood way, and it's okay if you believe that. I used to believe that too, and I no longer believe that. But I'm not trying to say you are wrong if you believe this or that. I'm just simply pointing out logically why we're supposed to look for the day. So notice that famous verse when it says nobody knows the day or the hour. It doesn't say nobody knows the year, right? In fact, there are many instances in the Bible where God tells us, God hints at which year it is. And furthermore, this verse, if you look at the context of it, it was meant for the unbelievers, because in the scripture, there are multiple passages where believers are not supposed to be caught unaware, it says. There are many passages where it is not the thief in the night for us, for believers. We are supposed to know that so that it is not like a thief in the night. What about, I just said, as I said, what about the fact that Jesus himself said the son doesn't know? Well, I believe that this is also misunderstood, because what he meant was the Son of Man as a fully 100% human being when he was here on earth, when he gave up his certain rights as Son of God. He didn't know at that time, but as Son of God, when he was restored on with the all authority in heaven, when God gave him the all authority of heaven and earth, when he was resurrected, he, of course, was restored in perfect union with the Father. And so he's going to know everything because he's perfectly one with the Father. And he's the only one that is qualified to open the seal. So in fact, disciples asked him, right? They asked him, Frank, like flat out. He said, when are you going to come back? And Jesus answered him specific prophecies about the end times. If Jesus didn't know when he was coming, why would he tell them? How could he answer those questions, right? So anyways, so these are some things to think about, think about why this verse may not be what it appears. So let's get into this solar eclipses and lunar eclipses. Why am I mentioning this? Because this year we had a very interesting phenomena. We had a partial solar eclipse, and then immediately following there was a blood moon, and it was a super blood moon, and then after that there's three subsequent supermoons. So there's total of 4 Supermoon Tetrads, and preceded by this solar eclipse, just like the scripture says that there will be a solar eclipse, the sun being darkened and the moon being turned to blood. And so this occurred on the first day of the second month on the biblical calendar this year, which happened to be on April 30th. And people, the unbelievers, a lot of people, whether you believe in Christ or not, they always have this thing about these signs in the heavens, and they turn it into some sort of a new age thing instead of what it really is. It is a sign from God, but they don't acknowledge God. So they say that this was some sort of a powerful wish granting portal, or it'll lead to some financial opportunities, and carries the power of 100 new moons, and all kinds of conjectures that are pagan and new age in nature. But we have to understand what this really is. So the partial solar eclipse that occur also happen to be called the black moon. The black moon is similar to what a blue moon is. Sometimes we say, oh, once in a blue moon, right? So the blue moon's definition is when you have 2 full moons in a given month. So a black moon, similarly, black moon is 2 new moons. When the new moon occurs, there's a little sliver, like a little crescent. And when there's 2 new moons in a given month, it's a black moon. So on April 30th, the first of the second month in the biblical calendar, the new moon, that was the second new moon for April. So they call it a black moon. So it occurs also every 29 months, I found out. And so to have the black moon occur with the solar eclipse is extremely rare event. It is very rare. And so let's go a little deeper into the meaning of the moon cycle. Okay, what is the meaning? So when the new moon occurs, it commemorates Jesus's birthday each month, because that's when Jesus was born. He was born on Nisan 1, the first day of the first month of the biblical calendar, or the Hebrew calendar. And so every time you see a new moon, that is a sign from God that marks Jesus's birthday every month. So we're supposed to celebrate his birth every month. What about the 10th day of the lunar month? That's when, as you know, that's when Jesus entered the Jerusalem on a donkey, right? And we call that Palm Sunday. But traditionally, what the Jews did was they sacrificed, they brought the Passover lamb, which was born nearby town in Bethlehem, to Jerusalem. So isn't that really awesome? Jesus was born in Bethlehem, and he came to Jerusalem on the 10th day, when they're supposed to do that with the lamb, the Passover lamb. They've done this every year, as long as they had the temple. They were doing this every year without knowing that they were rehearsing for Jesus's triumphal entrance into Jerusalem. So on the full moon, on the 14th day of the month, which is the Passover, that is the day when the Israelites came out of Egypt. That's the day that commemorates Jesus's death, because he was crucified on the full moon, on the 14th day, on the Passover. God was so precise. He told everybody to celebrate Passover, because he knew he would be crucified on the Passover, to the day. He fulfilled his prophecies to the day. And something that on the day of his crucifixion, on the night of his burial, there was a full moon, a full blood moon, that is. But I couldn't verify that. A lot of people speculated, but I bet you there was. I guess we'll find out when we get to heaven. And then the following day, on the 15th day, the moon still appears somewhat full. His burial occurred, and the beginning of Feast of the Unleavened Bread begins for 7 days. And then on 3 days later, 3 nights and 3 days later, on the 17th, it commemorates his resurrection. So immediately after this 3 day or the third day or the 17th day is the Feast of First Fruits. So he was resurrected right after the 17th day or the beginning of the 18th day or the 8th day of the week or the first day of the week. And that's why we a lot of us celebrate worship God on Sunday, right? But interestingly, Bible never tells us to worship God on Sundays, but I won't get into that topic today. But so that is the Feast of First Fruits. So all of Jesus's first coming major events was fulfilled with this new moon cycle. The first four, the first three feasts of the Lord, the Passover, the unleavened bread, and the first fruits, and the fourth one, which is the Shavuot or the Pentecost, was fulfilled as well, right? And then I'll talk about the Pentecost. Why there are three, not one, in relation to the super moons that we have here. So let's go back to this. Well, so when was the first super blood moon today? This year, it occurred on the 15th of May. That was the first super blood moon. Why is it super blood moon? Because it was a lunar eclipse, which only occurs on the full moon, which gave this blood moon color, the moon turning into blood color, into red, and that's why it's a blood moon. But it happened to be the closest to the Earth, within 90% of the perigee, or the closest to Earth, within 90%. If a moon is about at least 90% closest to the Earth, that becomes officially a supermoon. So there was a first supermoon of the year. It was called nicknamed the flower moon, according to Farmer's Almanac, and flower moon because that's when the spring flowers begin to spring up, a new flower, new birth, a beginning of a birth pain, if you will. So this date, May 15th on the Gregorian calendar, happened to be the second Passover on the Hebrew calendar, on the biblical calendar. And I went over that in a few teachings ago, the significance of the second Passover, how it relates to a long journey, how it relates to God coming back, Jesus coming back from a long journey. So the fact that this second Passover started with a super blood moon is I believe it's another sign from God. God is saying, hey guys, look, here's a second Passover, and I'm going to show you a super blood moon. And so I think this is why it's so significant. And then, and I went over this, the supermoon causing the blood moon occurrence. It is thought that a blood moon occurred in the evening of crucifixion, which I went over moments ago here. So the second blood moon occurred exactly a month later, on June 14th, on another full moon, the following month. And it's called the strawberry moon because, so all these moons have nicknames. The Farmer's Almanac nicknames these moons. It has, every moon has a different nicknames. Same moon can have many different nicknames. And one of the nicknames they gave it was a strawberry moon. And that's because the strawberries are being harvested. And they also call it a birth moon and a honeymoon. And if you think about this, you're like, I was like, wow, it's called the honeymoon. Why do we call it a honeymoon? In order to go on a honeymoon, you have to have a wedding, right? So this also is a hint that the wedding with Christ and his bride is about to occur. And here's another name, birth moon, right? The birth pains. The birth pains is happening in our earth right now. And so this picture is actually, this is a blood moon I'm sorry, this was not a blood moon. This was regular supermoon, but it did have a lot of reddish color to it. This was an actual picture that was taken over Athens on June 14th this year. Oh, by the way, the first one here was taken it wasn't from this year's super blood moon. It was about 2 years ago over Yosemite National Park. There's a waterfall and the super blood moon kind of lit up this waterfall and had the appearance of this blood moon spilling blood, just like Jesus did on the Passover. And so after the second blood moon this summer, toward the end of June, there was an interesting planetary phenomena that occurred. And what happened was all the 7 planets in our solar system, in our morning sky, lined up in a straight line, almost in a straight line. And this was called celestial parade. And this has not occurred since 1864. This is a very, very rare event. And it occurred for about a week after summer solstice on June 21st. And here's a picture of the actual picture that somebody took at that time. And you can see, oh, sorry about that. Oh, what happened here? You can see that there's Mercury here, Venus, Uranus. Here's the moon in the middle of it, which is brightest. And then here's Mars, there's Jupiter, the king planet, and there's Neptune and Saturn. So you can see it was a straight line. This is a very rare phenomena. I told you this did not, I'm sorry. Oh, what happened here? So I told you this did not occur since 1864, very rare. And so right before the third supermoon, this occurred. And then on the third supermoon, another supermoon occurs the following month on a full moon on July 13th. It was called the buck moon or the thunder moon because the buck, the deer antler, the horn of a deer matures, and that's why they call it a buck moon. And then the thunder moon because there's a lot of thunderstorms during the summer, so they call it a thunder. Another name for it is a thunder moon. And it was the biggest and brightest of the year. And this picture was actually taken on July 13th of this year, and you can see this is the supermoon over Las Vegas here. So this is the actual picture from that supermoon. I thought about the name of these moon and the buck moon and the thunder moon, and although it was named from a secular source, I thought it was interesting because they might have named it without knowing that this also is alluding to Jesus, because who is Jesus? He is the horn of salvation, right? So the horn of a deer maturing, they call it a buck moon. So this is referring to horn of the salvation. And the thunder, if you remember in Book of Revelation, Jesus from his throne, when he speaks, it describes his voice as thunder coming out of the throne. And so also alluding to Jesus. So all this supermoon is about Jesus because it's happening on the full moon, remembering his crucifixion, right? And then the fourth moon here, I haven't put up the picture because it hasn't happened yet. So it's just about to happen in the next full moon that you're going to see on August 11th. It is called the Sturgeon Moon. That's because I guess the sturgeons are maturing, and that's when the sturgeon season is. And interestingly, I learned that sturgeons can live up to 150 years. Remember this number, 150, and it'll all make sense to you at the end, hopefully. And is also called the flying up moon. I believe this is because the sturgeons can fly up out of the water. and I think that's why they call this flying up moon and the harvest moon, because a lot of the harvests of different crops are occurring at this time. And some of the crops here are named here: corn, rice, black cherries, and I would imagine there'll be other grains and fruits that might be harvested during this time. And so I wanted to show you a little 40-second video of this sturgeon. I thought it was very interesting. If you could bear with me a moment here. Let me see. Okay, where is... There it is, okay.
But don't you see it?
Okay, hang on a second. Okay, let me see. Let me see if I could share this screen. There it is, okay. All right, look at this sturgeon.
Oh. Yeah.
Looks like they can tie the boots.
Get back with the short version, maybe here. Yeah. Oh.
Okay. All right, let's go back to our presentation here. So as you saw, I thought when I looked at that footage, I was just like amazed because it was so symbolic. I thought, you know, a sturgeon coming out of the water, like flying up. I think that's how it's, you know, it's a direct metaphor for the rapture. I think I'm not saying that the rapture would occur on this date, but it sure is like hinting at it, as if this is the right time, this is the right season that is supposed to occur. So here are some key dates of all the things. I'm not gonna go over this like this. I'm gonna instead show you a chart that I made that summarizes all this. Okay, so here is here's a biblical Hebrew calendar. First month is called Nisan, second, third. There's a name for all these Hebrew months. This is not necessarily, it doesn't correspond with that Gregorian calendar, but so let's map this these festivals out and see if we can see a pattern of what is supposed to occur. So on the 1st of Nisan, I told you that's the birthday of Jesus, right? And according to the temple documents that was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, that is when the annual ordination of priests supposed to occur. I found that to be very interesting, that the annual ordination of priests at the temple was supposed to occur on the birthday of Jesus, because Jesus is our high priest, right? And that occurred this year on April 2nd, corresponding to the biblical calendar Nisan 1. And then there's a Passover, the first Passover on Nisan 14th, on the full moon on April 15th. And then there's on the 15th of Nisan, we went over there, that's when the Feast of Unleavened Bread starts for 7 days, right? And then there's a Passover number 2 that occurs the following month, which occur on Iyar 14th or May 15th. And then the Feast of First Fruits is supposed to occur 3 days later, as we reviewed earlier, right? But there are several first fruits, but the first of the Feast of First Fruit occurs on the third day after the Passover. In Deuteronomy 18, verse 4, it says, first fruit, the first fruit also of thy corn or wheat, of thy wine. So that the wine is created by the grapes, right? So if there's a first fruit of the grape, then there's going to be the first fruit of the wine. And of thy oil, this oil came from olive oil in the Holy Land. So if there's a first fruit harvest of the olives, that's when the first fruit of the oil festival occurs. So these things are not occurring at the same time because they're not maturing at all at the same time. The wheat, the grape, and the olives, they're not maturing at the same time. So Israelites were supposed to bring these first fruits whenever there was a harvest of these things. And the first of the fleece of thy sheep, even the coat of the sheep, shall thou give them. So in the temple documents, as I referred to a short moment ago, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, they found not only these papyrus scrolls of the Bible, but also temple documents. These were documents that was related to the things that the priests were supposed to do with all these different ceremonies and feast days, and it lays out exactly when they're supposed to celebrate these different feasts. And of course, the Bible tells us the 7 feasts, but there are a little bit more found on these temple documents. And the Bible here, Deuteronomy 18, refers to it, but it doesn't give the dates, but the temple documents do. So in Nehemiah, likewise, say the same thing. Nehemiah 10:35, it says, to bring the first fruits of our ground and the first fruits of all fruit of all trees year by year unto the house of the Lord. And so there's a feast of first fruits of barley, which occurs on Nisan 18, 3 days after the first Passover, which occurred on April 19 of this year. And then exactly 50 days from there, at the Pentecost, is the feast of first fruits of the wheat. And that's called the Shavuot, the feast of Shavuot, or Feast of Weeks. That is the first Pentecost that we know about, but that is when Jesus actually ascended. He did not ascend 10 days before that, because there was a week of after the resurrection. He spent a week meeting with the disciple. He didn't begin teaching them until 10 days afterwards. So he ascended 40 days after he started teaching, and that happened on Pentecost number 1. But a lot of people think that's when the Holy Spirit came down, but that is, I believe that is in error. So this occurred on June 15th, and then another 50 days, exactly 50 days after that, is when another feast occurs, according to the temple documents, on month of 3rd of Av, which occurred in July 31st of this year. That's the second Pentecost. I believe this is when actually the Holy Spirit came down to the church, when the church age began. And then another 50 days after that, there's a final feast of the first fruits of the olive oil, which occurs on Elul, the 6th month, on the 22nd, which will occur on September 18th this year. That's the third Pentecost. And then the day after this is what we call the Feast of the Wood Offering. And Nehemiah refers to this in chapter 10:34. It says, we have cast lots among the priests and the Levites and the people to bring the wood offering to the house of our God by clan annually. So this is supposed to occur once a year at set times in order to provide fuel for the altar for Jehovah our God, which as is written in the Torah. But in the Bible, it doesn't tell you when it is, but in the temple documents, it tells you that it occurs one day after the Feast of the Olive Oil. Feast of the Wood Offering occurs on Elul 23rd. And it is not just one day. It gives them some few days to bring these wood, because I would imagine it's a lot of wood they have to bring, because it has to last for the whole year. So it's not just for one day. It's for 23rd to 28th days. So that's 5 days worth of just constantly bringing the wood. Of course, this symbolizes the cross where Jesus was crucified, and then this begins the fall feast on the 7th month of Tishri, the Feast of Trumpets that we know about, which lasts for 3 days, called Yom Teruah, and exactly 7 days later, after it's finished, there's a Yom Kippur, or Day of Atonement. And finally, the final feast, the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot, that occurs for a week. So Jesus fulfilled the first 4 feasts: the Passover, the unleavened bread, the first fruits, and Shavuot. He fulfilled the first 4 feasts already with his first coming. So it is thought, it is well known that the second coming is going to be the rest of the 3rd feast are going to be fulfilled during his second coming. So when I look at this, I noticed something. I noticed that from Passover number 1 to Pentecost number 3 is exactly 150 days. But from Passover number 2, if you add 150 days, it lands exactly on the Sukkot, Feast of Sukkot. But before we do that, let me show you the solar eclipse that occurred on the 1st of the 2nd month, right there. And then the supermoon, super blood moon, the first supermoon, which happened to be a blood moon, occurred on May 15th. And then on a monthly basis, the supermoon's been occurring, and the final 4th supermoon is going to occur on August 11th. So you can see this pattern that God is trying to tell us something. He's trying to say, hey, the sun is being darkened, the moon is turning into blood. And not only that, I'm going to show you 3 more supermoons after that. Hang on a second. Let me see. There's a chat message here. Okay. So then 150 days from Passover number 2, you can see that it lands exactly on Feast of Tabernacles here. So I told you that God showed me this Noah's flood timeline, which I showed you in the past. The timeline, which is so precise about his first coming and second coming, and I didn't fully understand it. God told me a lot of things, but I always knew there was something to this that I'm not understanding fully, because I didn't know if this was the picture. I understood the first coming. It's here because it's easy to figure out what has already happened, but it's more difficult to correlate the future events, right? And so the first part of this first 150 days, and then there's a second 150 days in the Noah's flood timeline. And I thought this was symbolizing the 7-year tribulation, but God was revealing to me that this is not so. This is talking about the year when the tribulation actually starts. And the fact that this occurred on the 600th year of Noah's life is a symbolism for the 6,000th year of human history. And when you actually plug in the dates of this timeline, as if this is a 2022, it correlates perfectly with what I just showed you, the solar eclipse and the blood moon and the Supermoon Tetrads. It correlates exactly. It fits exactly. The Passover number 2 occurred on when the rain started, when and Noah's flood timeline, and the ark landed exactly on the Feast of Tabernacles and on this date. And so I thought that was quite amazing. And I didn't map out the rest of the year. I just focused on this first half of the year, and I don't know if the rapture is going to happen at the end of the Feast of Tabernacles. It could be any moment now, but I do believe that this year could be it. So there's another teacher that I told you earlier that talks about this year being the 6,000th year. And I think my time is up. So I'm not going to go over this, but it's you could refer to this in the future. And I taught you in the previous teaching about why I think 2022 could be the 6,000th year for the Gentiles, for Christians. It is. It's not for the Jews. It'll happen 7 years later, I believe. So there are a lot of things that I went over in the past about this, so I'm not going to repeat it. And Book of Luke, chapter 3:1 talks about when the baptism of Christ occurred, which was on the 27th AD. So you can figure out when Jesus actually died on the cross. And there's some debate. Many scholars debate 33, 32, 31, but I believe it's 28 AD based on the prophecy of Daniel, where Jesus's ministry was supposed to be 70 weeks exactly. And on the 62nd week of his ministry, he was cut off. The Messiah was cut off, the book of Daniel says. And that's when Jesus was crucified. So that was 28 AD. So 2,000 years from 28 AD becomes 2028. And if you account for the 7-year tribulation, it will be 2021. But 2021, according to Hebrew calendar, runs all the way up to September of 2022, which is what I've been showing you with the Supermoon Tetrad diagram. So there are other evidences, which I went over in the past, Revelation 12 sign. There's, another thing is that this year, many Hebrew scholars said that this year is not only a Shemitah year or the Sabbath year, but also Jubilee year. So it's the Sabbath year, beginning of the Sabbath year, and the beginning of the Jubilee year. And it's if you know the time clock of the Bible, you will understand that is phenomenal timing. And if you look at TorahCalendar.com, it says that the 6,000th year since Adam's birth was actually this year on May 16th. I don't know how they figured that out, but according to TorahCalendar.com, it says that May 16th of this year was the 6,000th year of human history, which also happened to be that first supermoon, which happened to be the blood moon. So I'm going to give you guys a homework. So after all this, how do you prepare for it? How do you prepare for it? Book of Romans, chapter 13, verses 11 through 14 tells you what to do, how to prepare. And you're supposed to, put on God's armor, walk honestly and not sin, and focus on God, focus on Jesus, and be led by the Spirit. So I'm going to end with this. I'm going to end with something that little Elliot said to me the other day, and here's his little prayer before our meal.
Thank you for this food in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, guys.